Hello and welcome back to the Crossroads Calligraphy YouTube channel. My name is Renee and my pronouns are she and her. I'm coming to you from Tucson, Arizona, which is traditionally Tohono O'odham land. And today's calligraphy demo is about tips for actually drawing guidelines for your calligraphy. So I'll go over some of the measurement and accuracy tools that I normally use, as well as a few different methods that I use in my work to create accurate guidelines that I can erase later. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera and we'll get started. So one thing that we use guidelines for is to make sure that our letters are accurately spaced, that our lines are accurately spaced apart from each other, our lines of text are spaced apart from each other, and then also that the angles of the letters are appealing to the viewer. So it's important that some of the lines, for different calligraphy and different things, it's important that some of the lines are perpendicular to each other or parallel to each other. So using something like a cut mat, like I have, that already has perpendicular lines, or even a graph paper. I tend to practice on graph paper a lot, but these already have perpendicular lines that are all evenly spaced from each other, so that I can decide where to move my lines to without having to worry about creating perpendicular lines. So, so now I'll of course go over tools that will help you to create perpendicular lines. When drawing guidelines, you of course need a ruler. This one I've had for a long time, and what I like about it is that it has a Cork-Back, so it doesn't skid around as much. Honestly, I need a new ruler because mine is warped. It's a little bit bent. I'm not really sure how that happened. I thought I took great care of it, but it is 15-ish years old. So, so a ruler that is straight and in good condition, and ideally has a Cork-Back or a non-skid backing. Optional, a quilting ruler. These are transparent, and so you can make your line, you can line up your ruler with existing lines on the page and measure that way. We have a set of set squares. Mine are hand-me-down from my neighbor, and they just work great. I've had them for a while now, and that's what they look like. Protractor. This is how you could measure the angle of your script. We'll go over how to use that. Optional, Ames lettering guide. These are helpful for quick lines, but they take a little bit of learning. I use this occasionally. We have, of course, our marking tools. So I have a sharp wooden pencil, and of course a sharpener. You do want to keep your point sharp because it keeps all of your guidelines the same width or weight, and the thicker the guidelines are, the smaller your calligraphy will be, because you're trying to use the guidelines as a guide, of course, and then the thinner your guidelines are, the bigger your calligraphy will be. So keeping your guidelines all the same width will keep your calligraphy more consistent. So again, pencil sharpener. This is a, I don't know what it's called. Mechanical pencil. It's it holds this long, well, it holds a long lead, but you can have it out to your own. And then of course a sharpener for that too. Just again, for the same reason, to keep your guidelines consistent. Drafting tape. This type of tape is not very sticky, which is great because it won't necessarily damage the paper that you're working with, the fine paper or whatever you're using to finish your project. I tend to tape both sides of the paper as well as the top and the bottom, so that the paper that I'm drawing guidelines doesn't shift around at all, and that'll of course increase the accuracy of your guidelines. So let's put all this to use. Okay, so here we are with our paper, and this is just regular copy paper. And a note on working with paper: I, in my experience, no longer trust the edges of paper to be perpendicular to each other. I don't know if it's me, or if like my inaccuracy, or if the lines really just are not that accurate any longer. But I pick one edge of the paper that I treat as square. So, and it's usually the top. So I'll line up the top with, I'll just treat the top as square. And now I'm just going to tape it to my cutting mat, though I could certainly do the same with the graph paper if I want to. And I'll treat this as if we're drawing lines for calligraphy practice. So if I'm using graph paper, then I'll just rule the lines right on the paper and practice directly on the graph paper. If it's for a finished piece, then I will rule the lines on graph paper and then tape whatever fine paper that I'm using on top of that, and then we'll proceed as follows. So all I'm going to do is line up my ruler, and I'm going to use the wooden pencil for this. Hopefully you'll be able to see it better. And notice that I'm holding the pencil at the back, far away from the point. It's not as if I could actually write with it like this, and that's because I don't want to put that much pressure on it. If I hold it like I'm going to write, then my body is going to put pressure on it. So you also notice that if I'm going to write, my wrist is going to be turned, or my palm is going to be turned down toward the paper. So hold your pencil lightly with your palm facing upward, or even to the opposite side. So there is a line there. And I know my cut mat that each of these dots is 1/4 of an inch. So we'll say I'm practicing at 1/4 of an inch X height. Okay. Whoa. So this is one way that you can rule your lines. And so these horizontal lines are parallel to the top edge of my paper. So maybe I want to make some vertical lines now, but I don't have, we'll pretend I don't have this cut mat here anymore. I could use my quilting ruler. Maybe I'll make one of these dark so you can see. This will later be our baseline. So now I would line up my quilting ruler. Hopefully you can see that this line, this dark line, is visible through the ruler. So now I'll line it up. I'm lining up this red line with this dark line. Perpendicular. Okay. But if I didn't have my quilting ruler or the cut mat, what I could do is grab one of my set squares, line it up with the baseline. Take time to do this, like you have to look at it closely. Well, I think I did it backwards. That's okay. It doesn't matter, really, but I want to put this line close to the other. So again, I'm lining up this edge of the set square with this dark line. And then I put my ruler next to that. And I can either move the set square now and draw this line, or I can leave it where it is, double check my accuracy, and then draw my line. And again, I've moved my grip away from how I would normally hold the pencil. I'm holding it in the middle. Okay, perpendicular. Now I need to add my slant lines. So here, just to recap, baseline, header line, a center line, and then down here the descender line. Okay, line. So here we have our protractor. So if you're working with a vertical script, it would, I mean, the vertical lines would be 90 degrees from the baseline. Okay. But say we're not working with, say we're working with copper plate, which is a 55-degree angle. So I'm lining up this line here on the protractor with the vertical line that I drew. And then I'm lining up this bottom edge of the protractor with the descender line. Okay. As best I can. And then I look at the measurements and I find 55. And then for me, I line up the bottom edge of the protractor with my new mark at 55, and I find the point where this line and the bottom of the protractor intersected, which is here. Oh no, I got lost. Okay. 55. But we need a lot of these lines so that all of our vertical strokes will be consistent. So there's a couple different ways that you can go about this. You could print off guidelines on the internet. You could buy a practice pad that already has this slant to it. You can evenly mark ticks. You would measure them, of course. You could evenly mark little ticks on the descender line and do this action of drawing the line and measuring over and over and over again. Which, I mean, for some projects it wouldn't be the whole page. It would be for like 3 or 4 lines of text. I do want to point out here that I left this pretty dark. This is pretty dark compared with these lines. So you want to keep your guidelines light. So you could also line your ruler back up if you have your Ames lettering guide and a sharp pencil. Only a mechanical pencil fits here. You slide the guide along the ruler to make your lines, skipping or moving to a different opening each time in the guide. These are way close together, but you get the idea. There are also plastic templates coming out. I think my teacher Paul Antonio is making one. There may be some that are available through John Neal Books. And then as a note too, I always advocate for shopping for your supplies locally. So that might look like an internet search for art supply stores near me. And then scrolling past the big box ones, you'll find your local art stores. And they do, for the most part, carry these different kinds of tools, measurement tools, marking tools for your practice. And so now I have my slant lines. And again, you can draw these manually. I've done that more. I've probably drawn them manually more times than I've used the lettering guide. Just because I had small projects in areas where I needed lines. When you're making your vertical guidelines, you want to make them as evenly spaced as possible. These serve as a reminder of how wide your letters should be, or how wide you intend to make your letters, and also how far apart your words will be spaced. So they are like an underlying web that supports your calligraphy. So when you make them evenly spaced, guess what? Your calligraphy will be more evenly spaced. And when you erase your guidelines, if you are, side note, you gotta wait a long time for your ink to dry before you erase the guidelines. There's, I think, a tag on Instagram called Erase Too Soon Club, where you've all been a member of it. So be sure, I don't know, I try to let my work dry for at least a day before I erase the guidelines. Conversely, sometimes guidelines are a part of the composition, and I totally respect that. So going back to what I was saying, when you erase the guidelines, in your calligraphy, you'll see more even spacing, because you set yourself up that way. So now going back to my practice of not treating the paper as always being accurate. Now that I've made my horizontal lines parallel to the top of the page, and I've made this vertical line that's perpendicular to these, this is what I now consider square. So any further guidelines that I draw later will be perpendicular to this line. Also, whenever I cut down the page to size, if I need to, then I'm going to cut parallel to this vertical line, so that the calligraphy is still as level as I want it to be. And that way I have a little more control over what happens, I have a little more control over how square the page actually is. Like the page would then be square to my work. My work is not square to the page. And I just offer that to you to save you some last minute cutting or framing scenarios. And so now here is my X height, which is kind of my last tip for you. That I always mark the X height. I can show you. I always mark where the calligraphy goes, because I can get lost. So I always write the X. And it's dark on this particular layout because I always use this on my light table, and I've made a note that this is what size paper I ruled it for. This is what type of paper I ruled it for, like if it's folded, roughly how much text I can fit there, and what nib I normally use. Also, I've marked the margin. So what I do is put this on my light table, tape it, and then, actually no, I don't tape this to my light table. I tape, because you need to be able to move it around as you write, but I tape whatever finishing paper that I'm using to this, to the module, and then I draw my lines over it if I need to, or I just shine light through if I can, and use these lines to write. So I believe that's all I have to say. Oh, I do have one more thing that I was just reminded, and that is called try to keep your tools clean, because try to keep your tools clean, because like the oil or residual old art supply on the back of it will definitely get on your paper. Like you saw me kind of slide this around, and as I slid it around, it's picking up the lead that's already here. So if I don't clean it and then I go and I put it on top of a different, like a nice, you know, expensive piece of paper, and I'm sliding it around, then I'm getting lead everywhere. So I mean, in addition to taking care of your tools and making sure that you put them away and don't let your ruler get bent necessarily, just also try to make it a practice to just wipe them down real quick after you use them, and that way you'll extend the life of them, of course, and you won't have that frustration of having to try to, you know, clean something up from your work that you could have prevented. Okay, so I think that's most of the things that I wanted to share about drafting your own calligraphy guidelines. And again, it's just to support the accuracy of your work and to kind of aid you in your success for calligraphy. So I'll put a list of the tools that I use at the bottom. Again, I encourage shopping locally as much as you can, and though I will link to a couple websites too that I normally buy calligraphy supplies from. So thanks for watching. Leave any comments or questions below. Subscribe to be notified when I post a new video, and good luck with your calligraphy. We'll see you next time.